We now learn how to write expressions in their factored form, and we're going to do so with a three-step method that we'll illustrate with some examples. As a first example, let's say we're given 4x minus 12y, and that we're asked to write this expression in its factored form. Well, we can do this in 3 steps. And the first step, step 1, is to write each of the two terms as products of their factors. Here's how we do that. 4x can be written as 4x equals to 2 times 2 times x. And in a similar way, 12y can be written 12y equals to 2 times 2 times 3 times y. Now, each of the two terms has been written as a product of its factors, and we can go ahead and write that this expression equals to 2 times 2 times x minus 2 times 2 times 3 times y. And that's our first step done. We move on to step 2, and in step 2 we need to find the highest common factor of these two terms. So I'll just go ahead and say find highest common factor, so that's just HCF. Now to do that, all we have to do is look at both of these terms and their factors and underline every factor that these two terms have in common. So we can see that the first term has a 2, and so does the second term. And the first term has a second 2, and so does the second term. We can also see that the first term has an x, but there's no x in the second term. And we can see that the second term has a 3 and a y, but the first term doesn't. So all that these two terms have in common is 2 times 2. So the highest common factor in this case is equal to 2 times 2, which equals to 4. And that's our second step done. We now move on to the third step, step 3, and in step 3 we write the entire expression in its factored form using the highest common factor that we found in step 2, which in this case is 4. So I'll just say write entire expression in its factored form. Here's how we do that. We state that this equals to the highest common factor, so that would be 4, times, in parentheses, everything from each of the two terms that we didn't underline. So for the first term, we have an x that wasn't underlined, so I go ahead and write x. We can then see that the operation between the two terms was minus, so I go ahead and write minus whatever wasn't underlined in the second term. So that's 3 times y. And so I write 3y. And that's the final answer. 4x minus 12y in factored form is 4 times, in parentheses, x minus 3y. Let's look at another example. Say we're given 10x squared plus 25x cubed, and again we're asked to write this expression in its factored form. Well, once more we can follow our 3-step method. Remember? Step 1, we write each of the two terms, 10x squared and 25x cubed, as a product of its factors. So 10x squared, well, that's equal to 2 times 5 times x times x. And 25x cubed, well, that's equal to 5 times 5 times x times x times x. So at this stage, the expression can be written as 2 times 5 times x plus 5 times 5 times x times x times x. And that's our first step done. We move on to step 2, and in step 2, remember, we need to find the highest common factor of these two terms. So I'll just write HCF. Now, to find the highest common factor, we need to find all of the factors that both of these terms have in common. And looking at these, it doesn't take us long to see that they both have a 5, and they both have an x, and they both have another x. We can see that the first term also has a 2, but the second term doesn't. And we can see that the second term has an additional 5 and an additional x, but the first term doesn't. So the highest common factor will be 5 times x times x. So let's just write that. The highest common factor equals to 5 times x, and that's equal to 5x squared. And that's our second step done. We move on to the third and final step, step 3, in which we write the entire expression in factored form. To do that, remember, we use the highest common factor, which in this case is 5x squared, and we write 5x squared times, in parentheses, everything that both of these terms don't have in common. So for the first term, we saw that 2 wasn't underlined. So we go ahead and write 2. We also see that the operation between the two terms is addition, so that's a plus, so I write that as well. And for the second term, we didn't underline 1, 5 and 1x, so that's 5 times x, so that's 5x. And we're done. That's the final answer. We've just written this expression in its factored form. Let's look at one last example. Say we're given 8m squared minus 4m, and again we're asked to write this expression in its factored form. Well, once more, we can follow our 3 steps. So step 1, we write each of the two terms as a product of its factors. Well, 8m squared, that's equal to 2 times 2 times 2 times m times m. And 4m equals to 2 times 2 times m. So at this stage, we can write that this expression equals to 2 times 2 times 2 times m minus 2 times 2 times m. And that's our first step done. We move on to step 2, and in step 2, we look for the highest common factor of these two terms. That's HCF. To find the highest common factor, we look for each of the factors that these two terms have in common. And looking at these, we can see that the first term has a 2, so does the second one. The first term has another 2, and so does the second one. And the first term has an m, and so does the second one. And that's all that they have in common. Indeed, the first term has another 2 and another m, but the second one doesn't. So the highest common factor will equal to 2 times m. So I'll just write that. The highest common factor equals to 2 times m, which equals to 4m. Now, before moving on to step 3, we need to learn an important trick. We can see here that in the second term, all of the factors have been underlined. When this happens, it's important to think of, or even write, that there's always going to be a factor of 1. In other words, I can add a factor here, which will be times 1. And we'll see that that 1 is going to be very important, as it will appear in our final answer. Now that that's done, we move on to the third and final step. Step 3, in which we write the entire expression in its factored form using the highest common factor. So in this case, the highest common factor was 4m. So I can go ahead and state that this equals to 4m times, in parentheses, everything that wasn't underlined in green. So for the first term, that would be 2 times m, so I just write that. That's 2 times m, which is 2m. And the operation between the two terms is subtraction, so we have a minus here. So I'll just add that. That's minus. And for the second term, well, we saw that everything had been underlined, but we also just saw that we can add this factor of 1. So we write that 1 in these parentheses. And that's the final answer. 8m squared minus 4m equals to 4m times 2m minus 1. And that's how to write expressions in their factored form. And that's it for this tutorial. There we go, everyone. I really hope that helped, and if it did, please hit like on this video and even subscribe to our channel, because that really does help us. I'll see you soon.